Well, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Uneducated, Untrained Pastor. And I'm your host, Pastor Ronnie Qualls, out of Bow Eggs, Oklahoma. And it's been a few weeks since I've done this. I told you I'd try to do them weekly, but it's been crazy busy. It seemed like every time I tried to attempt to get down to the church to do this, it just didn't work out. That happened again today. I was hoping to get this done this morning, but here it is. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon, and I'm getting with it. I don't like to do them at that time because I'm a morning person. My brain stops functioning around 3 o'clock, and I just kind of got to deactivate. But I feel pretty good today. Tell you some things I've been doing. Just other than just the local preaching I've been doing. Maybe I've not mentioned this, but I do also like a nursing home type ministry. I do that usually once a week in a place where my father-in-law is at. But this past weekend, I was preaching at a conference down in Lake Charles, Louisiana, at a Heritage Baptist Church, where a friend of mine, Pastor Paul Priest, is at. And I've got to go twice to that now. So apparently they don't, the people, they probably okay with me, I guess, if I got to go back. But I just want to say this: the people treated us very, very good, very hospitable, very loving. Just truly were a blessing to us, and I hope that by our coming, I hope we was a blessing to them. I'll give you a kind of a Harold Smith type thing. You might be an uneducated and untrained pastor if not only have you not had formal education and formal training, but if when you learned that the word alliteration, you had to ask what it was, that all your points would start with the same letter. But when you went to look the word up and found out that it actually started with an A and not an I, you too might be an untrained and uneducated pastor. And I said that backwards, but who cares? So anyway, today, I just want to share some things with you that's been on my mind. And again, this isn't scripted. It isn't rehearsed. I'm not going to edit it. I'm not smart enough to do that. So I do these in one shot, one take, and it's just what it is. But I want to talk to you today about something, and I want to just start with this, just the title of it. Stop church hopping, people. Stop doing it. And I'm going to start with pastors on this. A lot of times pastors, we get in a kind of a habit. I don't know if you remember back in like grade school and maybe early in the junior high days, but you remember how we'd send them letters out, hey, I like you, do you like me? Yes, no, or maybe. And I don't know, back in my day, that's the way it was done. And you hope they would check yes. But that love affair lasted about a week, maybe two, and you were on to something else, somebody new, or they was done with you, however it worked. Well, a lot of times pastors follow in the same routine. They'll get into a place and they'll be there a couple years, maybe 3, and they just get the itch to start, I got to find somewhere else. Pastors, I'm going to tell you something. Unless God is leading you out of there, stop the church hopping, okay? I'm just going to tell you straight up, just stop it. Learn what it is to be committed. Learn what it is to stay with something, okay? You're treating this like it's just any kind of job. Like, I'm just kind of tired of this job, stop that. Longevity, there's a lot to be said for it. The other thing is this. People in churches, a lot of times, they just go from one church to another. So, Pastor, I want to just talk to you a little bit on how to deal with it. I'm talking to you first. You need to stop. What has happened, I think, when you're doing it in the pastoral role is that you have come to this idea that, it's just, you kind of get in a habit. I think it's habit forming that after so long, you just feel like it's time to move on. Listen, we're not led by feelings, okay? Let's just be straight up on that. We are led by the Spirit of God, okay? Now, again, I'll say this. Now, if the Spirit of God is telling you to go, then go. But do not be blaming the Spirit of God when it's just you wanting something new and exciting and all that stuff. Okay, now let's talk about how to deal with people that are church hoppers, okay? Well, let me do this first. Let me start with the parishioner. Let me start with the person in the pew. I'm going to say it again. Stop the church hopping, okay? Learn what it is to be a covenant member of a church. Now, you may be in a church that y'all don't have a formal type covenant. Some people are very formal on that. Other people are a little looser. I'm probably a little bit looser type guy. We have a church covenant, and when people become new members, we ask them that they sign the covenant. Now, it's not like a legalistic thing. It definitely wasn't the intention when we did it. It was more like kind of like a celebration. Like, man, I want to be a part of this church. But listen to me, folks. There's always people that they just go from one church to the other to the next. Soon as they hear something they don't like, they're on to somebody else, another church. And usually what happens is, sometimes they don't say anything. They just come in quietly, but they just keep doing this. You don't know why they left. You don't know where they're going. It's almost like the Spirit, right? But it's not. And you got to learn that just like a family. Listen, there's times that there's things that you may not like. You may not like the decision. That decision may change. There's so many variables to how this could be. Your reasons for why you'd want to go. Now I'm going to tell you this: if you're gonna leave your church, I want to tell you how to do it. Okay, if you're going to leave a church, be Christians about it. It needs to be for a legitimate reason. Now, again, I don't think the leading of the Spirit is just for pastoral ministry and things like that. No, it's for every believer. And I want you to know this, that if God is leading you, like you may be in a really good church, but you may be looking over here and you know about a church that is really coming along, and maybe you know some people there and you feel really drawn to that. First of all, bathe this in prayer. Okay? Be praying about it. Make sure you and your spouse are on the same page and you're both feeling like, man, I feel like we probably need to go to that church. Okay, at that point though, get together with the leadership of your church. Sit down with them. If it's something like that, just say, man, guys, we love you. It's not so much that we want to leave, but we just feel compelled that the Spirit of God is taking us over here to be a help. You never know what that church over there is praying about. Okay, that's one thing. The other one is, let's say that there's a doctrinal problem. Let's just say that, like in today's time, I'll just use this right here. A lot of pastors have gone pretty flimsy. They've bought into this CRT. They bought into this wokeism stuff, things like that. I'm going to tell you something. If your pastor is into that stuff, it's probably time for you to have a really serious sit down with them and explain to them, we're not going this route. Our biblical worldview is eons apart from this right here. And so you need, but do things right. And if you're going to ask Ron, if you're going to ask Pastor Ron what I think, this is the way I do things, okay? I believe that it would be biblical. It's just simple respect, it's courtesy, it's care, it's love. Even when you're at an odds, it ain't like I would say this person may not be a Christian, but I'm not going to follow that leadership. So I'm saying what you need to do is you need to sit down with them. And I'm sorry, just for a second, I'm looking at this thing and I feel like I'm awful close to you, but that's just kind of the way it is. I'm at my dining room table. I got my family right here. You can see in the picture, and we're even larger than that now. But I don't know. I'm just looking at this thing in the screen, and I'm pretty close. But let me get back to what I was saying. You need to sit down with the leadership. You need to just talk to them and I would say this, pray about it, write out the things, the reasons that you have. Sometimes things can be talked out. Sometimes there's just miscommunication. of that nature. And if that's the case, though, it's just like, look, we don't agree with the way that you're starting to take the church, and we just want to know what is going on. Why did you change? Where do you see it going? And then you have to really evaluate. Can we stay in this or not? And if you feel the need, but do not just do this. Do not just like, you get upset at something. Well, that's a third category. Sometimes people just get upset. We got the election coming up, and you'll have people in churches, and sometimes they're not even the most faithful people, but they get pretty fired up over presidential elections. Vote for Trump, all this stuff. And trust me, I'm voting for Trump. I'll just tell you straight up. Is he immoral? Yeah, that's another story. But look, I'm not trying to vote in a pastor here, okay? Probably just lost all three of my viewers here, but so be it. But here's the thing. Just because your pastor preached something or somebody else in the church did something and you got kind of flustered about it and got your feathers all in a ruffle, that's no reason to leave a church. That's absolutely no reason to leave a church. The church hopping has to stop. Now, pastors, okay, I talked to you about, possibly you might be a church hopper. And if you are, man, listen, I'm not speaking, I'm not trying to condescend to anybody or anything like that. But I'm just telling you this, as pastors, if you're a pastor, there is so much required of you. And you're going to have to tighten up the belt. You're going to have to man up and be the man that God has called you to be. And you stay at a place until God calls you somewhere else. Now, how do we deal with those people that are church hoppers? Well, I know of places where, like a Baptist association, and if you're a different denomination, you can still relate to this, I promise. It could just be a small town where you have, several churches, and for whatever reason, this family just goes from this one to this one to this one. You can't see my hand, but I'm doing this number. But and it's kind of almost like, yeah, they're at our church now, and now they left ours, and there was threw up a bunch of dust on the way out, they're upset, but just before too long they'll be back around. Pastors, when somebody comes to your church, do not be so much about the numbers and trying to grow your church and all that you're just going to take. Don't ever just take anybody just because. Pastors, sit down with them. Ask them, say, hey, where did you go to church before? Why did you leave? Did you leave on good terms? I mean, like that? Or is it, was there a problem? And we've had people before, the churches I pastored, and they would come, they said, well, yeah, they did this and that, and we left. And I'd tell them, I'd say, listen, I'm going to send you back home. You need to go back. And they'd look at me like, what? And I'm like, look, be a Christian about this. Be a real man of God and go back, sit down with them. And if you really feel like you need to be gone, that's fine. Just sit down and explain to him. Say, look, Pastor, I just don't agree with this. Maybe your theology has changed. Your doctrine has changed. Whatever it is, you need to sit down with them and just say, look, I feel like we need to go. And because as a pastor, when people in my church just leave and they don't say anything, you're just kind of sitting there like, what in the world just happened? Why would they leave? And you just don't know. So listen, pastors, when somebody comes to your church, don't be that pastor. Don't be that church that says, oh, we're just all about love here. We'll accept you here. Sometimes these people have actually been put under church discipline. And if you don't believe in church discipline and you're not practicing church discipline, you need to repent and start. Now, I don't mean just like, hey, let's go grab somebody today. But I'm saying when a problem arises with a member in your church, you need to go through the steps in Matthew 18, and you need to, really learn to practice. Listen, this ain't I'm like the waiter. This isn't my commandment. This is what the Word of God tells us in a New Testament church how to deal with with members that are causing divisions, problematic in the church. So if, because if somebody came to my church and I found out they were under church discipline, I'm sending them home. Why? Because they need to go back to the church where they got put in church discipline. They need to go back. They need to be held accountable. They need to be discipled. They need to be worked with, that they could be restored to fellowship. But see, what happens is, well, I don't like that, and so therefore I'm just going to go find me another church. And they come and they give their story. Now listen, pastors, they're going to come and they're going to give you a story. And the Bible, it's over in Proverbs. I'm not going to quote it exact because I don't even know where it's at other than Proverbs. But, it says, one guy comes and he tells you his story. Man, it sounds really good. Man, you're like, man, that's terrible. Until the other side tells their story, then you're like, hold on a second. Seemed like you left a lot of information out. Okay, so somebody's coming to your church and it could be under church discipline. Somebody just may got their, better not use that term, but they just got upset and they just wanted to leave. If all of the pastors in your town or in your association would come to agreement, and they know this church hopping, it's just not good. It's not good. It never creates strength in a church. It never creates unity in a church. It never creates that atmosphere of, I've got your back, that covenant commitment. It never does any of those things. And so, pastors, it's really up to us to stop the church hopping. If we together would start doing this and start going, wait a second, you were over at Bowlegs? Oh, I know Ronnie. What happened that was so, well, that guy was up preaching and he said something I didn't like. Well, why don't you go back and talk to him? Now look, I know I look meaner than a junkyard dog. It's all these wrinkles up here that I can't do nothing about. But if I get rid of them, I look a lot nicer. But I can't do it. And, and I know my voice is loud and kind of gruff, and I've been known, I come across kind of blunt. I found that people love me and hate me for the exact same thing. Some people love that and some people hate it, but there's no in between most of the time. But the thing of it is if all of the pastors would come together in unity and say, we're not going to do this no more, you're going to hold these people's feet to the fire. You may even force them. They may drive an hour away. But whatever the case, they need to be dealt with and addressed. Now, we need to do this in humility. We need to do it in meekness with, humility. But somebody's just got to say, hey, family, listen. We've noticed that through the years, this is kind of the pattern. Oh, my goodness, they're going to get defensive. I know it. I know they are. But that's part of being a pastor. It's dealing with the things that you really don't want to deal with sometimes. But we have for far too long just overlooked this, and like I said, some of you out there, all you care about is numbers. Shame on you if that's all you care about. And I know, and if you don't know who I'm talking about, I'm probably talking about you, right? Well, here's the thing. You need to care more about the body that God has given you, the church body that you're to care for. I'm going to be honest with you. Church hopping family, I'll be honest, I'd rather not join my church. I know that don't sound very loving, does it? Listen, folks, I don't need people with no more commitment like that being a part of our church. Now, with that being said, it's not that I don't want people to come, but if you come to our church, we're going to sit down with you and we're going to say, look, this is what you can expect from us as a church, as the pastors of the church, the leadership, the vision, the goals, all of these things. We'll sit down and we'll have a kind of a membership class. I don't do some long drawn out thing. I don't do things like that. I'm pretty simple and to the point. And but we do have a class. We go over that. But at the same time, we tell them this is what we expect of you. And I'm going to go back to this idea of what covenant membership is a little bit. And let me put it to you like this. We do have a covenant, and we have the covenant, and you'll sign it, and the elders have signed it and all this stuff. And then, and it's just saying that, hey, we're agreeing. It's kind of like almost like a marriage. Now, I don't want to get all weird on you, but years ago, me and my wife and our kids, my children were smaller then. They're all grown, as you can see up there, and I got grandchildren now, and I've got a great life, man. I'm truly blessed. But back in them days, I found myself in a church, and they had no formal membership. I mean, it was just kind of like you went there and you just kind of considered a member. Now, this is probably for another podcast sometime down the road, but there's a reason I believe in church membership. Because the world we live in today, there's churches on every corner. Who am I really pastoring? Who are my members? Well, my members are the ones that have agreed to what we believe, what we're about. They've signed the covenant. They're part of our church. That's who I pastor. Okay? Now, I can help you, encourage you, counsel you if you're not, but under my care, it's the people that are in my church. Okay, I'm just taking a long time to say something. Back in them days, early 2000s, I found myself in a church that didn't have these things. But when I decided that we were going to go to this church, this was going to be our home church, I went to the pastor on my own. Nobody made me do it. I just went up to him, shocked him, and I just said, hey, pastor, I just want you to know that for the time being, that this is our home church. Whatever you guys got going, we're going to be a part of it. I said, if whatever you need me to do, you just tell me and I'll try to do it. Now, and I'm going to be honest with you, the church what we was in, now this was a different time in my life, but long story short, I wasn't a Baptist back then. I mean, I probably wouldn't have claimed anything, but this church was a little more on the Pentecostal side. Now, I'm not picking on any of my Pentecostal friends. I've got some great friends that are Pentecostal. It's just not, I just don't exactly line up on all those things. But yet, that's the church I was in. And I tell this guy, I said, listen, we're on board. I mean, that guy invited me to go on a preaching trip with him and another guy down to Jamaica. I preached like 4 times down there. I mean, for whatever reason, I did the closing message of the whole. It was a 21-day crusade. And it was a little different flavor than I was used to. I can tell you about that some other time. But the point is we were on board. Anytime they had a service, we was there. Bible study, we was there. That's another thing I want to tell you, not just about church hopping, but to be a covenant member, to talk about commitment. Man, when your church has something going, be there, unless you're providentially hindered. I mean, if you're sick, maybe you're working, something like that. I know, listen, we're all tired. Don't tell me you're tired. Okay, look at me. Look at this. Do I look like I'm some lively guy right now, man? No, I'm tired. Not so tired I can't do this video, but I'm tired. And so we all feel that. But we need to learn to make the effort. What it is, it's about serving one another, even coming. I mean, think about your pastor. He studies all week. He's preparing for a message, and then you're just too tired to show up. That's just rude and ridiculous. I mean, come on. You got to do better than that. Do you know why people don't want to sign a covenant? I'll give you 3 things. They don't like commitment. They want to come as we feel like it, but we don't want you to grab a hold of us. We don't want to commit. We don't want to submit to authority. Do you realize that everybody in some form or fashion is submitting to authority? I mean, think about it. Even in a family, you realize that the husband and the father, he is the leader, the spiritual leader of the home. But do you realize that he submits himself to his entire family by providing and protecting them? Everybody's submitting to somebody. God has called certain people to lead in the church. Nonetheless, it's about commitment, submitting, and then it's about accountability. And people do not like to have their feet held to the fire. Listen, Christian, this is the Christian life. When Peter and Barnabas got out of line, Paul withstood Peter to the face. And I'm sure Barnabas was right in there. But he said, man, Peter, you're wrong and you're to be blamed. And, I've had brothers in my life hold me accountable when I was out of line. And yes, pastors get out of line. I can be a little fiery at times, and things like that. And we need that. So that's what. Listen, it's really just about being part of God's family. But the church hopping has to stop. Learn to get in a church. Find a church where you love it, the fellowship. And even if, you may go and you may, well, I don't know. Well, just stay in there. Just stay in there and you start saying, how can I help? What can I do? Learn to be a part. Learn to serve in your church. But pastors, on our part, we need to band together and say the church hopping stops here. No more of it, friends. You want to be that? You ain't going to be it in this neck of the woods. And we need to hold to that. We need to be in touch with one another. We need to hey man. And if I found out somebody left my church and I found out they was going to another church, I'd call that pastor. Now he may tell me to mind my own business. I don't know. But I'd say, hey, pastor, I just want you to know that they did not leave on good terms. They didn't talk to anybody. I have no idea why. And I would at least appreciate if you would tell them that they need to come talk with us. If they want to go to your church, that's fine. Sometimes, it maybe it's just a better fit. But we need to do things right. We need to be Christians about things. And I'll just say it again, the church hopping, it's got to stop. And Pastor, it should start stopping with you. Listen, this is Pastor Ronnie Qualls out of Bowlegs, America. And yes, you heard me right, that's Bowlegs. And this has been another episode of the Uneducated and Untrained Pastor. But the question is, you may not be smart, you may not be trained, but have you been spending time with Jesus? I pray that God blesses you. I hope you have a great day, and we will see you next time.